Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Zach coming to you from Washington, D.C. And today we will discuss getting started with projection mapping, creating atmosphere, buttons, image usage rights, and unified blackouts, all on Light Talk.
Hey, and this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California, back in town. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. Yeah.
Okay, what's the first thing you did when you got back into town?
I said, it's nice and warm here.
I took off his mittens.
Yeah, I took off my mittens. I was in Toronto. For people who don't know, I was in Toronto doing a remount of a Tosca that we've been doing all over the world. And this is like the fourth time they did it in Toronto. And normally this time of year, and I do a lot of work at the Canadian Opera Company, and a lot of times they hire you for like November or December or January. And let me tell you, it is cold in Toronto then. And they hired us now for what, May? They're thinking, oh, it's going to be so beautiful. Well, for the first week that we were there, it was like raining the entire time. Cold and very cold, almost freezing rain. And then Lori came for the last 3 days and the sun came out.
Oh,
Metaphorically and in reality. So it was actually kind of nice.
You know, the Canadians can't do anything right. They can't even do spring right. You know,
I love the Canadians. I love Toronto. I must say, if I was going to live in an urban environment, it would be Toronto.
cool.
Except for the winters. But no, it really is. I love the people. Every time I've done a show there at the Canadian Opera Company, it's been incredibly positive. The crews are unbelievably competent. And when I say competent in a good way, they are very nice people. It's all about making sure that you feel comfortable and they create that creative space for you. And the theater is just awesome. I mean, the theater was built, I believe, in 2006, and we did the first new production in there in 2006, Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk. And it's this gorgeous, gorgeous theater that's done so right. I mean, there are lighting positions everywhere. It is just a pleasure. And the crews are great. So, I don't know, I just had a wonderful, wonderful time. First of all, I got to give a shout out to Michael Kangas and Sarah Mansika, and they were my assistants. Michael is the lighting coordinator there. And by the way, Michael's going to be on the show next week because he's got like the best job in the world. and this guy knows so much about software, and they remounted the whole show. Last time we did it, which was 6 years ago, I think I used mostly VL 3500s and VL 1000 arcs, a few HMIs here and there, and a lot of incandescent fixtures. And now they're using Mac Quantums and Encores and a lot of other LED fixtures now. So he had to adjust all of that, moving from recreating the presets that we used. And there were a lot of presets, and he's going to talk about it next week. So when I arrived there, they focused, had everything focused, had all the conventionals focused. There was about like 150 conventionals in the show, along with all the movers. And they did it all. And then it was just amazing. I was like, it's like, okay, now I can use this time to just improve upon the show. You know, they had the board data. All the timings have been figured out a long time ago, so all the cue timings were there. It was wonderful. So it was just a great, great experience. No stress, zero stress on the show. And that's what we strive for, right? Zero stress.
that's how it should be. That's what happens when you work with good people.
Yeah, it's good people, but also it's just something about the director you work with, and Paul Curran, who's, I've worked with for many, many years on many, many productions. It's always so low stress. It's a wonderful thing, and he's a good leader. And I think if you have a director who's a strong leader, I think you're going to have a low stress production. And you have good crews. I mean, look, if the crew's incompetent, then the stress level raises because you're not getting what you want. The lights aren't being programmed correctly. The props aren't being finished, completed. Whenever that happens, then it's, then the stress level goes up. But yeah, it was great. So shout out to everybody at the Canadian Opera Company. The show opened last Friday. Yeah, this past Friday. And it's going to run now in rep with another production of Macbeth, actually. So I'm not in a theater, so I can say that word. Macbeth. So it's pretty cool. So shout out to everybody there. Doug, my programmer, was amazing, as always. He usually programs for me. And it was just a wonderful situation. Cool. So welcome, everyone, to episode 319. Yay, 319. It's good to be back. And we're going to start off with a little news, industry news. And there are a couple things we're going to talk about real quickly today. One of the things, which is dear to my heart, is what's going on with Central City and AGMA. Central City and AGMA. And by the way, if people don't know what AGMA is, it's a union that covers singers and directors and stage managers in the opera world. And there's been a contentious issue there. First of all, their contract was up for renewal. And they've been in contract negotiations now for several months, and they're at an impasse. And there's going to be a work stoppage. It seems to be at least one was voted for. I think yesterday. And if they don't get a contract together, they're not going to have a season. And their season starts very soon. I've retired from Central City. Last season was my last year. Part of the reason was because the artistic director left, and he was, a good friend of mine, Pat Pierce. So I felt it was the right time for me to move on and let someone younger go do it. But now this new person that they have come in apparently is causing some ruckus. And a lot of the singers are having issues, and the directors, and now AGMA. So we shall see what happens there.
Well, they clearly need some Backstage Franks. There's nothing to bring people together like a Backstage Frank.
That's a good thing. Backstage Franks. That's where Backstage Franks was invented, was at Central City
I
Opera.
remember.
Yeah, so, they should open up the damn old rusty old grill and grab some. I bet they're still there, by the way, because no one's going to eat them.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe they went to some fancy egg, ceramic hipster grill and just doesn't have that same flavor and taste. And without that,
yeah, right.
What's a Sitzprobe?
What's a Sitzprobe without a rotten hot dog, a petrified hot dog? Oh man, put that in your Sitzprobe. We're going to use this hot dog. Okay, and the other bit of news, which I think is really exciting, and I really want to get Zach's take on this, and that is Apple has announced that Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro are now available for the iPad. So, Zach, what do you think about that, man?
I mean, it's really interesting. I think one of the reasons behind it that I've read about, at least in the Final Cut Pro side of things, is that you're going to be able to use the camera in the iPad to capture right into Final Cut Pro and then edit. So it's really, I think, making a move at, content creators, as the kids call themselves these days, YouTubers and TikTokers and all that kind of stuff. So the idea of being able to have it be like a one-person production studio where it's the camera and the editor and the encoder, and then can publish it to something like YouTube it's pretty amazing to think that, when I started out in my career, we were still like, oh, you want to change that? Let me bring it back to the office and I'll come in tomorrow with a new version. And that was fast. And now we're talking about using these, basically consumer devices to do prosumer and professional work. I think it's a really great thing. And it's also, it makes these professional level software applications much more reachable for people that can't afford to get a fancy MacBook Pro or something like that, I think, which is really nice. And it also is a testament to Apple's new chip technology that's scalable across all their devices at this point now. So it's like, you write a piece of software for one machine and it works on all of them. It can work on a phone, an iPad, a computer just as easily. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. It is really cool. I have a funny little story. Lori and I were walking around Toronto on our day off. I think it was on Saturday. And this guy comes up from a TV station. He was a reporter. And he says, you guys look like Toronto Maple Leaf fans. Can I interview you? And I said, sure. Right? And so we're not Maple Leaf fans, but anyway, what do you think of the game the other night? Well, I thought it was very interesting, right? And you know what he used? An iPhone on a stick and a little boom mic.
Yeah.
That's it. You can do 4K on an iPhone nowadays.
Yeah.
So why not port that software editing, which is basically what they're doing with Logic? Because Logic is it's basically the Final Cut Pro of the audio world.
Yeah.
Right? And what's really interesting also, there's been a lot of talk about this on the musicians' sites and forums, that a lot of people do not like the pricing, because what they're doing is they're doing a licensing pricing. And it's only like $50 some odd a year, which I think is really nothing for that type of power. Yeah. But a lot of people are turned off by licensing. They don't like licensing costs. To me, it's a tax write-off. I can get both programs and write them off.
Well, I think people also forget that, 10 years ago, we didn't have a licensing scenario, but if you wanted to get the new version, you had to pay another $600. Or if you switched from Mac to Windows, you had to pay for it all over again, too. Now, this way, with most of these license agreements, you get to have it on more than one machine, and you always get the latest and greatest version. So I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. And they were showing, Apple does such great promo. If you go onto their website, they do all these videos of how people are using this iPad type. And it's definitely geared, like you said, to the hipster, but I don't know if you don't call them hipsters anymore. What are the young people called now? I have no idea, right? But to young creators, punks, there you go, to young creators.
Yeah, creators, they call themselves.
To creators, and that's awesome. And they're using it, and they're showing how they're using such, with an iPad. Yeah. I think it's really smart, and I think it's really kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, to think that you can get a machine that's under $500 that'll run these things it's amazing.
Yeah, Final Cut needs an M1 chip at least.
Right.
But Logic doesn't. You can go with a high-end Apple chip. Yeah. But, listen, you might as well go M1 now. I just think it's a great, I use everything off my iPad. I have an iPad Pro, and I do all my music stuff. I do video, everything. And it's unbelievable. So kudos to Apple, and it's going to be available, I think, in a week or two. So
by the end of this month, I think
it's going to be really, really awesome. Steve, what do you think about all this mess?
I'm just grateful that I deal with lighting. Yeah, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about it.
You still have an abacus, right? You're using an abacus.
I have to say, again, it's. How many times have you been stopped by technology gets in your way, and you kind of go, if I just had a piece of paper and a pencil, I could figure this out in 3 seconds.
Hey, we're 16 minutes late today because of technology. I couldn't figure out what program to use to get this damn thing recorded.
Anyway. But you came up with a solution. You deleted it.
I deleted
it back on, and it worked.
Turn it off, turn it back on again.
My dad did hand drafting, and he always said, when my pencil breaks, I sharpen it.
Okay. So let's get started. Zach has the first question of the day.
Yes. Hi. So Bobby in Montana writes, I'm interested in projection mapping. What are the basics I need to know how to do this kind of stuff? Well, Bobby, for those listeners who may not know, I'll first say what projection mapping is. So projection mapping is the hot new thing that's been around since the 50s, where you project imagery onto a building and use the imagery to sort of transform the appearance of, it doesn't have to be a building. I shouldn't say that. That's the most general version. You project imagery onto a three-dimensional object and use the imagery to transform its shape. Many people think the first actual use of this was in the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland on those singing busts, where it's just sort of a smooth bust like you might see a mannequin in a store, and they project a singing face onto the bust to give it the illusion of life. But I would say the basic thing you want to think about when you're talking about projection mapping is what is my surface and what are the different ways that I can sort of make this surface come alive or transform. So like if you're doing it on a house, you may say, okay, my house is very flat. What can I do to make it feel like it's round? Or what can I do to make it feel like water is pouring down the side? Sort of embracing the three-dimensionality of the surface you're projecting on, much like with those singing busts where there was a mouth that didn't move and they projected a moving mouth onto it. You really want to think about how do I want to make this come to life? And then think about where am I going to put my projector in order to do that. Those are the two main things that I would suggest. And you can go on YouTube and search projection mapping, find 1,000,001 different examples. So if you're looking for inspiration, you'll find it there. And there's even lots of how I did this kind of videos. So I think, and you can always start with Disney because they do a lot of this projection mapping stuff on their castles and on It's a Small World and all other kinds of interesting surfaces that they have all over the park. So have you guys ever dealt with a projection mapping kind of thing? A lot of what I would imagine in the lighting world, much like in the video world, is sort of like doing whatever I can to, draw the eye where it needs to go, but also not screw with the illusion of the mapping.
Or overpower the performance taking place around it.
Right. Even the very simple programs have mapping capabilities. Even QLab has projection mapping in it. So I think that's something that everyone needs to understand and get to, because we have to light around it, exactly what Zach said. So I think that's really, really cool.
Cool.
Well, Charles in Amsterdam writes, when creating an atmosphere using a mixture of incandescent and LED fixtures, how do you match the color temperature, especially when trying to achieve a good 3200 Kelvin or candlelight color? Well, it's funny you should ask this, Charles, because that's what I just did. We did a period piece of Tosca, and it was all candlelit. Everything had to have that color temperature. And we had a bunch of encores, like I said, Mac Quantums and some encores. We still used a few 3500s, which had terrible color correction, and a bunch of incandescent fixtures. Now, when you have incandescent fixtures already in the plot, then it's a lot easier to do this, because what you're going to do is primarily create the atmospheres with the incandescent fixtures, and then have the movers apply big, bold washes or specials or whatever. So you're kind of mixing in the mover into already a color space that you've established very well using the incandescent fixtures. So that's actually, to me, pretty simple. As long as you've got good moving lights, that can give you a good color correction. And they're getting better. They really are. The encores are really, really good doing this. And there are new lights by ETC and high-end new red LEDs that really help out. But to mix that in, you just have to have the lights that can able to do that. And I must tell you that using these encores and these quantums in Canada made it really simple. And we'll talk more to Michael about this, because Michael had to do a lot of this. And because he's a designer as well, he knew exactly what I wanted, and he knew the challenge, so that he was able, with his eye, just on site, just as we were working over rehearsals, over technical rehearsals and dress rehearsals, by saying, how does that look? Because he'll basically, add a little bit of color, a little bit of red, whatever, in the LED fixture. And I would look at it, I said, looks great, or I need a little bit more yellow, just a tad more yellow, or a little less green. And that's how you do it. And you're using your eye. The eye is the most important tool you have whenever you're doing this type of color matching. How about you guys? What do you guys do?
Well, it's funny that you have this question today, because just maybe like 15 minutes before we started today, I got an email from a company that makes color spectrometers, for measuring the color on your screen. And it was announcing that they are becoming obsolete. and that the tools today have so much control over color that there's no longer a need for a device to measure it. And I think what you said is really true, that, at the end of the day, it's up to your eye to make sure that everything matches. Because if you just rely on math and numbers and what the computers and the lighting consoles tell you, you may not get the result that your eye wants to see. So at the end of the day, I think you have to trust your eye.
Or you're spending all of your time with the set designer or the director explaining to them the math of why you're absolutely right, even though it looks terrible on stage.
Right.
Yeah, I saw a show last week that had terrible color matching on, and it was just horrid on the costumes. And that's when the costumes hit the stage, everything changes. And hopefully 99% of the time when costumes hit the stage, you go, oh, thank God, it looks awesome, right? The colors, I can see it now. The design's complete. That's the best moment, because if you're doing a tech rehearsal and the actors are out there in yellow T-shirts and orange T-shirts, or dresses, and just colors that are all out of whack, you're trying to light that. You're trying to light the actors. And so all you can do is really look at their skin. But when the costumes come on, then it's like, wow, that's exactly what I want it to look like. Or in that little percentage, it's like, disaster! That lavender dress is now gray. How do you fix it? Fix it before the costume designer comes to you and starts stabbing you in the back of the neck with scissors. You got to fix it before she gets all the way down the aisle.
You work in some violent workplaces.
Oh my God. It's all about self-preservation around here, let me tell you.
The wild woods of Toronto.
That's right.
Well, I guess I have the next question, and it comes from Kansas, and it is Tracy. And she asks, how do you choose what type of build or button to use for a specific moment? Well, a button is, at least in the lighting world, a button is a moment on stage that you're trying to punctuate an amazing moment. So maybe there's a big build and all the lights dump out and you're left with just a silhouette on stage, something that inspires the audience to applaud. Usually the lead in on a button is about 8 bars, and then you want to try to stick that ending just like a gymnast does. The perfect button moment, if you want to find a perfect button moment to practice on, listen to Hello, Dolly. The ending of that, the music leads up to the big moment. It's a big musical ending, and there is the perfect button. The same was true a few years ago, Patti LuPone's musical War Paint, when she did Face to Face. That was an ending that needed something. But not all endings need a button. You can't just stick a button in there because it's the end of the song. If you go back and you listen to Guys and Dolls, there's no button at the end. She's singing and you think, oh, it's over. And then like a couple beats later, just before you applaud, the string section comes in and does a little play out. And you go, oh, well, that kind of killed it. Or ABBA. ABBA, they're fading. It's hard to put a button on a fade out. I think the button has to support what's happening. And a button doesn't always have to be in a musical. There are plenty of places to put buttons or accents, if you want to call it that way and think that way. I just saw a play a couple days ago that had a drama, a serious play, had a big ending on it, in which the actor on stage is telling a 3-part story, and the first part of the story there is a build, an accent, and the second part of the story there's even a bigger build and a bigger accent, and then when he started the third part, which is the summation of everything, the lighting designer decided to dump everything out and go really kind of dark on stage and put them in a pool of light, which was the worst thing they possibly could have done. And because you're building, and the tension is building, and the audience goes, whoa, what just happened? It got dark all of a sudden. And we actually talked about that. The director said, what'd you think of that? I said, well, I wasn't very satisfied with it. And they actually did another little mini tech at the end of it. And the director and the designer went, I guess we can make it even bigger and bolder and brighter. even though it's an intimate moment. You have to listen, to what the composer is doing or listen to what the playwright's doing. So, when I build a moment like that, I'm trying to walk in those footsteps and trying to not get in the way of what the composer or the playwright's doing. I don't know, Zach, do you have buttons in projection?
Sure. And most of the time they're, linked or aligned with the button in lighting. I think it's a motif in in the musical comedy world, at least, that, as you said earlier, it's really to tell the audience, to communicate with the audience, to elicit a response, whether it's laughter or applause or tears or whatever. And I always find it interesting. I feel like a lot of designers have their own style as to how they mark the button. I think there are some designers that will always save an extra 10% so that on that button they can go just a tiny bit brighter on that last beat. And there's others that have sweeping motions that all kind of crescendo and align and lock in at that last moment. And, in the projection world, my job is to try to enhance that or get out of the way of that, sometimes too. And it's interesting that you mentioned the idea of the dumping out, that there are times where that can be effective. I did a play, and it was a very wordy, dark play, and slowly we removed things on stage, both scenic and visual, from projections and lighting, until at the very end, our button was just one guy in a light above him, and then it went out like blowing out a candle kind of thing. So, I would consider that a button, even though I think the generic term for button is the end of a song in a musical comedy. And I remember doing a show in Asia where the lighting department didn't know what a button was. And the director kept saying, and on the button, you're going to do this, right? And they would just say yes. And they all nodded their heads. And then nothing happened. And he's like, you said you were going to do it. And they just said yes. And so we had to teach them what a button was. And we pulled out, a bunch of cheesy Tony Award performance videos and said, that thing at the end is the button. You are listening to Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers. And today, Light Talk is sponsored by...
Pip, pip, tally, bally, ho. Here comes the cheeky rigger of Sheffield. Next week will be your first up-rigging call. And right about now, you're asking yourself, which safety harness should I buy? That's a hard question to answer, but let's try. Many safety experts will tell you a one-size-fits-all is a mistake. Experts will also say that different harnesses exist for different types of work, and they exist for a good reason. Not the cheeky rigger. Why should you be forced to have 2 or 3 different harnesses? You only fall once. These same so-called experts will suggest that you need to spend your hard-earned money on harness materials that are rated to handle 1,500 pounds or 10,000 pounds. Really? The cheeky rigger wants to know when you last saw a 10,000-pound rigger, or those OSHA guys that tell you you might want to explore Kevlar. Really? The cheeky rigger would like to know when was the last time you rigged during a gunfight. The safety sallies of the industry might even suggest you want to consider a top-of-the-line harness that includes quick connect buckles, webbing, and padding, safety accessories, yada, yada, yada. Well, the cheeky rigger of Sheffield says bollocks. Yes, the cheeky rigger is proud to introduce the You Will Almost Never Die safety harness. With the cheeky rigger You Will Almost Never Die safety harness, workplace safety will skyrocket. Why? Because you're going to pay attention to what you're doing if you're in that thing. The You Will Almost Never Die safety harness is called that for a reason. You almost likely never die, but you might. And why is that? Because the name says it all, and fear is a good thing. Right now, for example, is a good time to say, I love you, Dad. So order one today for Father's Day. And if Mom is a rigger too, a second harness is free on us. 3 simple payments of $19.95, and the folks are taken care of. The cheeky rigger of Sheffield. We make underwear too.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those latte-drinking, air-kiss-kiss, lovable hipster monkeys bouncing around the Light Talk Central coffee shop means it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about what do you do when people use images of your work without your permission? Well, unfortunately, this happens a lot. I couldn't believe it. And this all actually came from something that happened last week. I believe it was the final dress rehearsal of my show. And someone came up to me, actually Paul came up to me, and he said, "Have you seen this?" And he shows me he showed me his iPhone, and he had a book that was dialed up at Amazon.com that Amazon was selling. And it was a book by Donna Leone, who apparently is a popular romance novelist. And the book was called Falling in Love, and the image behind it, it takes up the entire front cover of the book, was the scene that we were lighting on stage. It was Act 2 of Tosca, the end of Act 2 of our Tosca. So I believe it was the 2012 production of it, but it was the same set, same lighting, my lighting, Kevin Knight's costumes and scenery, Paul Curran's direction. And they are selling this, and it's out there, and I haven't seen it yet, but I don't think anyone's given permission for them to use it. Hopefully the photographer did, but I would think that you would need to get permission from the designers and the director, don't you think? Maybe not. I don't know. What do you think?
I think this is a touchy subject because I see this all the time. You know, I'm trying to purchase archival photographs of my work, and I get pushback from some theaters, not all, few. I get always pushback on it, and at the same time, they never asked me for my permission to shoot the show or publish it or not put my name connected to the photograph. It is a weird thing. And I bet you photographers everywhere have something very pertinent to say about this. We just grab these images and we stick them on the web or we stick them in a portfolio, and it's kind of a wink and a nod, and everyone kind of gets screwed over in some fashion by this, by not going through the simple steps of asking for permission and paying for royalty fees and doing this the right way. One of my photographs showed up in a book. It was Romeo and Juliet at the Shakespeare Theater. And this book had nothing to do with anything connected to the theater or whatever. They had simply seen the photograph and grabbed the photograph and thought this is an interesting photograph to have, like you, on the cover of the book.
Don't even get me started on this one.
I knew you had something.
I mean, I will say my first foray into the world of image licensing in this way was actually when I was working on a show at the Public Theater in New York about the artist Keith Haring. So Keith Haring had a long-time partnership with a photographer named Taekwon Chi. And when they were starting out, they were both, totally broke artists on the Lower East Side in New York City with no agreement, not even a handshake agreement, just like having fun, drawing pictures in the subway and taking photos of it. And then when Keith Haring became a wildly successful artist, all of a sudden there were lawyers, and lawyers had lawyers, and those lawyers had lawyers. The Snoot Group may have even been involved. and they had serious arguments that actually impacted what we could use in our show about who owned the imagery. Was it the person in the photo or the person who took the photo? And unfortunately, in that case, it was whoever had the highest price lawyer that won the rights. So it was Keith Haring eventually that owned all that imagery. So that's one story. Another story that I have is that in 2002, I was working on a Broadway musical, and I'm not going to say the name of it, but it would be easy to find. And it was just in the era of digital cameras starting to become like a thing. And also just in the era when designers started to have websites. So we took a bunch of photos of our dress rehearsal, and the next day we had it on the website. And it was like at a time where that kind of immediacy was unheard of. No one had ever thought at that point that like you could have pictures from your show on a website the next day. And it got a lot of hits and a lot of buzz was caused about this. And then maybe 2 or 3 months later, the shop that built the scenery had a full page ad in a magazine, and it used one of our photos that they had just taken off of the website and stuck on there. And I think part of the discussion when I was like, hey, you can't just put my photo in your ad without permission, was it was still such a new thing that nobody really knew what the appropriate method was going to be for dealing with that kind of stuff. So luckily I had a grandparent who was in the photo business, who actually I think worked with Stan's father. And he had told me a bit about this stuff and how it works. And so I contacted the shop and I said, hey, I'm happy to let you use my photo, but you're going to have to find some way to credit me and pay me for it. And so we made a deal, and that was great. The next thing that I always think about is when you do a show, let's say you do the premiere of a show, and then it goes on to become a licensable entity. So you can go to a company like Tams Whitmark or Concord Theatricals, and you can license Rock of Ages, let's say, to do at your local theater. Now, when you go to license it, it comes with a bunch of the production photographs from when it was on Broadway, which then these theater companies can use to promote their own production when they promote it as the Tony Award winning Broadway musical, et cetera, even though what they're putting on is not what was in those photos. And that's an additional layer of confusion for me, because those photos were taken legitimately and signed off on, but now we're allowing other theater companies to use those photos to promote their show, which we don't get any residual from. So it's a crazy, wild world out there.
That's crazy. I mean, especially what you just explained, because I guess the audience is going to look at your designs,
right,
thinking that this is what it's going to look like, but they're going to show up and they're going to say, well, wait a second. Yeah. This is not what, it's nuts, but I understand why they do it. But I just think that there should be like from the Broadway production or something like that. Yeah. Or even in this book. And I haven't bought the book. Maybe I should. I really need a good romance novel right now, I think. And it's funny because it's about a soprano, right, who's actually doing Tosca, but she's like having affairs with all these other, the stagehands and the lighting designer and everyone else, who knows. But I wonder if in the back it just says, photo courtesy of the Canadian Opera Company, or does it say Tosca directed by, lighting by? I doubt seriously it says that. Or maybe it just says the photographer's name, because the Canadian Opera Company has a wonderful photographer, and it may be just his license. He gets credit. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm not upset. I'm really not. I just think it's kind of crazy because it has to do with intellectual property, and I would have liked to have at least had someone say, hey, would you mind if we did this?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. When I worked on the revival of Evita on Broadway, I contacted the Eva Perón Museum in Argentina and asked if they had any images, because I thought, oh, this will be like cool. Maybe they'll have something no one's ever seen. They sent me a whole bunch of images that were all from American newspapers, and they told me I could use whatever I want because they didn't know that they had them illegally, so to speak. So it also depends on who your source is. I think especially now in the digital age where it's so easy, for someone to download a picture and then disseminate it all over the place, that it's hard to know where it came from. And then you kind of just...
Or have AI change it,
Right.
I mean, if you had use a photograph and then have the software change it enough so that you really can't tell. This is all these questions, all these intellectual property questions are coming up now. We're going to talk about that on another show, about, that recent Copyright Office ruling saying that anything that you use with AI, you cannot copyright. And people can steal it. Right. And that's a whole nother, that is a whole huge can of worms. As scary as AI is, ChatGPT and all that other stuff that's coming out that people are using, as scary as that is, there's a whole nother world of licensing that, because I know Bob uses AI a lot in his content creation. But according to the Copyright Office, somebody could take one of Bob's pieces of content and use it without giving Bob any money, even though Bob only may have used the AI in a way as a tool. According to the latest copyright decision, it's not copyrightable.
Well, it may end up being like music. I can't copyright the note F sharp, but I can copyright how F sharp is used in a sequence of notes.
Well, this latest court ruling for Ed Sheeran.
Oh, right. The Marvin Gaye one.
The Marvin Gaye song, it's 4 chords.
Yeah.
But those 4 chords are used in that progression, in that style on like hundreds of songs.
Yeah.
There's just so many things you could do. There's just so many chords and chord progressions you can use. I mean, come on, Zach, 1-4-5, right? Or 1-6-4-5.
Or blues progression.
Any sort of blues progression is used in like 90% of the songs, right? So how can you copyright that?
Yeah,
it's very, very interesting. This whole AI thing is a lot of interesting rulings going to come out about it.
Agreed.
Cool. So Steve has the last question of the day.
Lars in the UP asks,
Lars.
How do you... Lars. His friends call him Larry.
I like to be named Lars, David's just so boring. Lars. Okay, good. Lars
we'll just say it again. Lars in the UP asks, how do you create a quick and unified blackout when using a mix of LEDs and incandescent fixtures? I think you go back about 20 minutes and David explained that. You have a good programmer. I don't know if there is a quick way of doing it. I mean, it's easy. I just look at the decay rate on all that stuff and build different times for it so it all matches up. It's not particularly difficult, but you do have to think about that. The incandescent fixture takes 5 seconds and the LED takes 3 to get to the same place. So that's how I do it. Well, what did you do, David? You just had that problem.
I just did it. Okay, I had a whole mixture of LED and some arc fixtures and also a lot of incandescent fixtures. And if you're doing a quick blackout, and this is where it came from, right? And I have one solution for this. An incandescent fixture will never black out instantaneously because the filament is cooling down. When you stop the voltage to the filament, it doesn't completely black out quickly in a 0 count. You say, I want this in a 0 count, but you're not going to get a complete snap out. You will with an LED fixture, and you will with an arc fixture, because the lamp in an arc fixture stays on and shutters just close. So, so we just did at the end of Act 2 of Tosca, we had an incandescent fixture off stage on a stand, like a 6-foot stand that was shooting through the torture door, and there was like a slow fade in that, and that was easy. That was an easy one. But in Act 3, which is the last act, I had an incandescent fixture that went through that same door, very similar door, that was basically throwing all the shadow of this jail work on this big wall. And the Tosca was jumping off onto a mattress that you couldn't see, of course. She jumped off the wall. But I had 2 5Ks that were on the deck that the audience couldn't see, just throwing light up for the dawn. So she goes into this like sea of light, and that had to have a snap out. So for the 5Ks, what I used was we put those old-fashioned shutters on them, Dousers, and they snap out quickly. I mean, really quickly. So we did the blackout, and there was one light lagging, and what it was that light coming through the door. So I said, do you have a Douser for that? For that light? And they said, no, we don't. We don't. That's, it's a small light. I think actually, what I think it was? It was a source 4 par, right? So Michael said, this is why. I said, you're coming on the show because you thought of this. He says, I'll just have an electrician back there with like a piece of cardboard. He'll just
the human Douser.
The human Douser. And it worked. And we have all this super high-tech stuff, right, in this theater. And we had this one electrician, with like a piece of cardboard or whatever, just holding it and then said, light Q 73, go. Boom. Done. That was the end.
Yep.
That's
I can't think of his name now. Who is the guy in the 20s who worked with David Belasco? He wrote a manual of the stage switchboard. But, I mean, he's all about that in there. He's like, I put a mirror over here. Yeah, we put something over there. We rolled a piece of scenery in front of it. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways.
It's true.
Yeah, there you go. You go.
I did a show where we had a Douser in front of the projector, and we just kept gluing nickels to it to get it to go faster. So I think it took about 45 cents to get the speed we wanted.
Oh, I like that.
That's awesome. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast. That way you won't miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the Snoot Group with the legal team of Sparks, Burnout, and Chase will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Washington, D.C., and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you more of our casserole of nonsense.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
We'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Bye-bye.